which is the ego, which is the shadow. And uh, so can you share with us what is essentially the shadow?
So first of all, thank you very, very much for quite an embarrassing introduction. A little bit flustered. I'll try to live up to everything. Hope I don't disappoint. Um, so, what is the shadow? It really is a very loaded question, and the shadow itself is also a very loaded term, highly, highly misunderstood. And I mean, I could really, really speak for hours, and we don't have hours. So, for all intents and purposes, if I had to describe what the shadow is, starting from its esoteric sense all the way through to the practical, what does it matter to me as an individual sense? Yeah, because what's important to understand is that um, it says in the Torah that man is a small world and that the world is a large man. Adam hu olam katan ve'olam hu adam gadol. And what that means is that whatever is going on in the world in terms of laws, and when I say laws, I'm talking about universal laws, the universal laws of nature, what what is actually midat adin or midat elokim, right? Because to differentiate between the two names of Yud Kei Vav Kei Elokim, Elokim as in nature, because Elokim and Hateva, nature, they have the same gematria of 86. It's din. It's harsh because nature doesn't care about your story. Nature doesn't care about your intentions. If the best person in the world and the worst person in the world, if they weighed the same weight and they were to fall off a building, then they would fall at the same speed to their death. So you could ask, is that fair? It doesn't really come into play, that question of is it fair? There is another part of the creator of Yud Kei Vav Kei that does care about the story, and there's a whole after story that happens, but we should live a very, very long time before we get to experience that part of everything. So the laws of nature are extremely exact and extremely precise. That's why mathematics is such a precise thing, that 1 plus 1 equals 2, like all the time, everywhere. 5 divided by 2 is 2.5 everywhere, never not. And it's very, 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 very precise. And if you want to understand the level of precision, then you've got to think about technology, because technology it has to be precise to like the thousandth of a fraction or of a decimal and beyond. And we all know about technology that with emails, you can't, if the email is john@gmail.com, you can't decide that you're going to be conservative and say jonathan@gmail.com and expect the email to get to the same inbox. You can't be reform and say johnny@gmail.com. And you've got to be very, very specific. And you cannot decide that you're going to put a comma instead of a dot. It's all very, very precise. And the best way to understand godliness, elokut, is to understand technology. So whatever's going on the outside of the world in terms of light and darkness, day and night, up and down, what we call polarities, right? It's called zel u'mat zel, this opposed to that. This is polarity, or commonly known as the yin yang. Whatever's going on the outside is happening on the inside. So what we can talk about, if we speak in terms of day and night, or light and darkness, within the mind, we can talk about the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. We can talk about also, we have to talk about the light self-image, who I think I am, and then the polarity of that, which is my dark self-image or the shadow self, okay? And these things have to be in their duality. Ultimately, what we're looking to do is we're looking to reach the singularity of consciousness, when this is what we just had Purim, and the whole point of Purim, when it talks about Ad lo yada, reaching this place of not knowing the difference between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai, that another way of saying that is like rising above the duality of cold and hot, and not seeing them as separate, seeing them as two extremes of one thing called temperature. So the same thing, that's also why Arur Haman and Baruch Mordechai have the same gematria, 502. So ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to reach this place of singularity, the ascension of consciousness, which would parallel in biblical terms as the final redemption. But essentially, what is shadow? Shadow is the obstruction of light. Okay? So if there is light shining and then something obstructs that light, then on the other side of the obstruction is that exact, it's called a tavnit, or a tziur, a tzura, the shape of the actual light and its blockage, and on the other side is the exact shadow, so like literally carved out. Then there is the shape of the shadow, what's known as the cast, or Americans would say cast, of the, pardon my South African accent, yeah, the cast or the tzura of the shadow, and those are the technicalities of it. But essentially, shadow comes when there's an obstruction of light. Okay, so when looking at the own self, the shadow brings about the duality. The shadow, as an obstruction of light, is how Hashem went from a singularity of the infinite light. In order for there to be two, then there had to be something that obstructed that light. So Hashem had to obstruct his own light in order to create shadow. So once there was an obstruction of light, we can call it the Chalal HaPanui. It just happens to be that the first world of Atzilut, the Shorish of Atzilut, the root of Atzilut is the word Tzel, which means shadow. So shadow is how we get from a singularity to a duality, okay? Which also means that by default, if we're going to go back to a singularity of consciousness, then the process would need to be reversed. We would need to eliminate the shadow in order to reach the singularity of consciousness. And Bezrat Hashem, that's what will happen very soon nowadays.
Or to synthesize.
So the synthesis is the ascension, the hitalut, the rising above the duality, which just came out of Purim. This is so relevant.
Yes.
Is that if we truly understand that Ein Rash Yered Mishamayim, it says in the Gemara, there's no bad that comes down from heaven, and that in order for there to be an expansion, there has to be a contraction. And for a human being, the contraction is very pleasant. The expansion is very pleasant, but the contraction is very painful. Now, because of, let's call it, being stuck in duality, in this illusion of duality, when things are painful, then we've associated the pain with not good. And that good means pleasure, which is it's not really true, because everybody knows that if you want to do good to your body, you don't go to the gym and stroke your muscles. If you want to do good to your body, you go to the gym and you basically rip your muscles to shreds, and you got to feel that pain, that lactic acid buildup. And because we've got such an association between the muscular growth, the pain, and the muscular tension, and the pain that comes with the lactic acid buildup, and then the muscular growth and the endorphins that come with it, there is actually a pleasure associated with the pain. And the same thing happens with birth. That I'm sure all the mothers here would attest that birth is painful, but the pain of birth and labor is so directly associated to birth that when a woman goes into labor, people are like, they're excited, like this is a good thing, because there is such an immediate association, a psychological association between that specific pain and the birth that comes afterwards. So too, that part of this rising above duality is understanding that if I'm going through a tough time now, it's not necessarily a punishment or a bad thing. In order for there to be an expansion in the master program of Yud-K Vav-K, there has to be, Yud-K means concealed world and Vav-K is the revealed world. What that means for us humans is that the pain that comes from the higher worlds, that is the preparation for the expansion. Okay, so the whole point of, I'm getting back to shadow, the whole point of our own shadow self is in order to create a negative imprint, okay? A negative imprint. I'll explain what that means. For those of you that remember Kodak pictures, so the way Kodak pictures work, and a Kodak, the way you say camera in Hebrew is, should I write in cursive or in print? Does everybody read cursive here? Thumbs up, thumbs down? I'm going to write in print anyway. So the way you say camera is you say matzlema. Matzlema. Right? That's how you say a camera. And a picture is called a tzilum. Tzilum. So you can see that the shoresh of these words is indeed Tzadik, Lamed, and Mem, right? What's that? That's Tselem. And it says in Bereshit that man was created in the Tselem of Elohim. So there is this direct parallel in terms of the process of human development and how, before digital cameras were, how cameras came about. So how did the camera come about? You put this negative film, that's what it's called, the negative, yeah? Negative film into the camera. The photographer would want to capture a certain object, would press the button, there'd be an exposure of light. This is so profound. There'd be an exposure of light. And this exposure of light would make an imprint on this delicate negative film. And there you had a negative imprint. And that negative imprint is basically everything. So no negative imprint, no negative film, no pictures in the album on the coffee table. And how would these negative films get developed? You take them to a developer and you would go into a dark room where there's lots of shadow. And there the negative would be inversed into a positive. And there you had your photos, yeah, your memories. And not only that, if for whatever reason the album got destroyed, as long as you had the negative still, that we used to get them in these envelopes, we keep them like in some drawer somewhere, yeah? As long as you had the negatives, you could go back to the developer and you could redevelop them because that was the ikar. The main thing was the negative imprint. Now, the same thing happens with the human. There is a saying in Jungian psychology, which is sort of, Carl Jung was the daddy of shadow work, is that where I am the most wounded, I am the most accomplished. Okay? Where I am the most wounded, I am the most accomplished. Now, this law of wounding and accomplishment, or contractions and expansion, works across nature because it's a universal law. So where, if an archer puts an arrow into a bow, where there is the greatest tension, there is the furthest flight of the arrow. With construction, where there are the deepest foundations, there is the highest building. And I'm sure everybody knows that the strongest trees grow in the strongest winds, right? So there is this yachas, there is this relationship between the negative and the positive, between the contraction and the expansion. Now, what's really, really profound is that I don't know how many people here heard our discussion on that podcast that we did, that conversation that we had. But because in the spirit world where the neshama comes from, there is no bad, there is no illusion. Here in this world, it's called the Alma de Shikra, the world of illusion. Illusion just means not truth. It doesn't necessarily mean lie, yeah, because sheker also means lie. Anything that's not truth is an illusion. And so in this world, which is subject to duality, if the neshama is, let's say the neshama is powerful, and the neshama is brave, and the neshama is intelligent. No, let's make genius because it's a polarity. The neshama is a genius, right? Really smart. So let's just say that the neshama in its source is already all of these things. It's powerful, it's brave, and it's genius. once it enters into this world of duality and polarity, then these simply become the positives. And that means that the neshama has to acquire a negative. Just like if we were discussing how high we wanted a building to be, let's say we bought a plot of land, and we were discussing how high we wanted the building to be, then on the paper, we could just draw this really tall building. But then when it came to actually applying those blueprints into actuality and executing the blueprints into a construction plan, you don't start building, you start digging. It's the exact same thing. So that means that the neshama has to come in to a body where everything is so perfectly planned. There's these exact parents or lack thereof, exact siblings, and the entire environment that would be conducive to what? To it acquiring the correct negatives. And so that would be, it would have to acquire a belief that I'm weak or helpless, or that I'm a coward, or that I'm an idiot or stupid, or Americans say dumb. It has to be like this. It absolutely has to be like this. It can be no other way. Now, what's crazy or beautiful, whichever way you want to look at it, is that these things, they really hurt. These things really, really, really hurt. And so the way that they come about is through a process in Jungian psychology known as wounding. Okay? Wounding. Remember the saying, the axiom, where I'm the most wounded, I am the most accomplished. I'll give an example on me, for instance. I've been blessed with an ability to speak well, and the words come out of my mouth quite in flow. But I stuttered really, really badly from age 5 till age 8, out of nowhere. It was like a stuttering fairy came and hit my tongue, and I stuttered really badly, but I mean embarrassingly bad, for 3 years. And then it just went. I didn't go to any course or workshop to learn how to speak properly. And the truth is that now I'm in my 40s, I can still remember the tug of war in my throat, trying to get the words out and them not coming out. I remember that really, really well. And all I had to do in order to become a speaker as an adult was not die. That's all I had to do, was just stay alive. And the whole coding of my ability to speak was already imprinted in my neshama. And so it finds the right family, it picks the right family, the right everything, so that it has that specific wounding. And unfortunately, because we're humans, the wounding hurts. And to make everything, I don't want to say worse, but to help the process from a human design point of view, there is a design within the mind, a spiritual design, but still in the mind. And this is this tendency, this inclination of myself to be negative. It's called the Yetzer Hara. So what that means is that when a child is, and think about it, I want you now, when you think about children, I want you to see like little kids, like these beautiful, innocent little angels. I want you to see them as the negative films that go into a camera. This like clear, very delicate, negative film that's in a camera. And it doesn't matter. You could be the best parents on earth. You could do everything right. The wounding can happen at a split second. I was actually in shul now over Shabbos, and there was a young father with a beautiful little child. The child must have been not even 3, and the father had the talus over his head, and he was sitting in the corner. And this child was like looking, "Where's my dad? Where's my dad? Where's my dad?" And like you go into a Hasidic shul, everyone looks the same. Right? It's not like my dad's the one with the pig jacket. You know what I mean? Everyone's wearing kapotas and everyone's dressed in black with like a talis. And this child was looking for his father and couldn't find his father. And there was nothing untoward. And there were actually people saying like pointing, but the child couldn't actually see like there specifically. And the child walked around a little bit. And it could have actually been that in that moment of like, where's my daddy? And that moment, boom, a negative imprint comes along. At that moment, so I'm saying a lot of parents, I work with a lot of parents, and they think that like, wow, I'm really screwing my kids up. I'm damaging my kids, I shout and I'm too harsh and I'm, it's not really like that, because remember that without these woundings, these don't happen. It's really profound.
So it's ultimately all about our choice, which is really what makes us man. Because in our actual makeup, we are divided between these polarities. And the question is that focus, or that harnessing, that ability to actively choose what it is that we are embracing versus what we are subconsciously being reactive to, is really where it's all at.
On a very deep level, yes. On a very deep level, yes. On a more, let's call it practical level. On a more practical level, because what I've just explained is a very merciful way of like understanding the shadow, right? As children, where there's no bad intent. But why would a person come to me in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s? Why would a person come to me and say, I want to do shadow work, I want to break through? There's got to be something that the person wants to improve or change that they don't seem to be able to do by themselves. So this is all nice. This is all nice and very, very kind, and it is the truth. And it's a very compassionate way of looking at things, because I mean that is the truth. That is what's going on. But that's on a level of seed, right? You look at the seeds. There's nothing wrong with the seed. What happens later on when a person is an adult, and the reason that a person would even want to do shadow work or shadow breakthrough is because the shadow self, the shadow persona, so there's my light self-image, that's like all the positives. But ultimately, people come to do this deep work because they do things that they afterwards regret and can't seem to stop it, or they say things that they afterwards regret and can't seem to stop it, or want to achieve a goal, a specific goal, and are simply unable to achieve this goal no matter what they do. Okay? So this is why people come to do work. It is beyond choice, correct. It is beyond choice. This whole thing is very much, at some point, there may have been a contract to engage in all of this. I don't know if I agree with that, but it's neither here nor there. The reason that people come to me to do this type of work is in order to break through. That's why it's called shadow breakthrough. We break through loops and ways of being and these barriers by invoking the shadow self, by integrating the shadow self.
So, right? How do we do that?
I'll explain. So there is, in order to understand in order for me to do the navigation in the unconscious mind and find those, we call them shadow beliefs, yeah? I'm an idiot, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm a loser, I'm a failure. The majority of the self-development world, and I'd say even therapists, by no ill intentions, they tell people that these words are lies and that they're not true, and that you've got to shout louder or you've got to just focus on the good. And I'm not condemning anyone, because everyone's got to do whatever they need to do in order to feel good with themselves. But the way that we break through these blockages is by going into the unconscious mind, identifying these beliefs, which is basically the realm of the inner child, and then integrating them through one thing and one thing only, and that is self-acceptance. That is it. Literally, the secret to breakthrough, the secret to raising vibration, the secret to raising self-value, which is an unconscious area of development, the secret to expanding consciousness, is all about self-acceptance on the deepest unconscious levels. That's what it's all about.
So, I mean, we could ask a question on that, and I'm gonna play the devil's advocate over here, because if you say that self-acceptance is just, I should just self-accept everything, there is, as we're getting closer to Pesach, we're supposed to get rid of the Chametz. We're supposed to get rid of those parts of the self, or that Yetzer Hara, that part which is Chametz, right? So what does that mean to accept, and and the way I feel it, like to synthesize, to bring those parts together? What
Sure.
you understand that?
Sure. So from my experience, I can say like this: if what we're trying to do ultimately in breakthrough and in the ascension of consciousness, whether it be individual or collective, if what we're trying to do is accept ourselves in our dark self, in our dark places, then the shadow itself can't be the chametz, because I need to integrate that. So what is the chametz? The chametz is the aspects of myself that I think is myself, my ego. Because ultimately, what's the difference between chametz and matzah? What's the difference? If you actually take a piece of matzah, that's right, Michelle. You take a piece of matzah and you got a bread. So the one is like this. If we look at it, one is this thick, and the other one is that thick. So if we talk about sourdough, if they both got the exact same ingredients. Matzah is flour and water, and sourdough is flour and water. Then what would be the difference between this and this? What makes this big and what makes this thin and essential?
Time.
And the answer is time, which leads to what? Michelle says air. Air. And funnily enough, I have this meditation, which is like an ego killer. And that is, I call it the conscientious mugger, or mugger, conscientious mugger. Got to get my American resonance going. The conscientious mugger, he goes like this to someone. He says, give me your money, give me your phone, give me everything. And he says, okay, now that I've got everything, I am going to kill you, but I'm going to do it in 2 minutes. I'm going to give you 2 minutes so that you can make peace with everything. You can meet your maker in peace. So in those 2 minutes, the person's not going to spend those last 2 minutes wanting things that they don't have. A person's not going to spend those 2 minutes feeling self-righteous about an argument that they have with someone that they've got, like we say faribbles in South Africa, where there's like bad vibes. In those 2 minutes, the person's just going to like just be okay with everything. And if we take those 2 minutes and we make it a week, right? Your last week, you're not going to spend your last week wanting stuff that you don't have. You're not going to spend that last week hating yourself. You're not going to spend that last week making yourself feel self-righteous about an argument that you had with someone. You're probably going to call everyone and say, listen, I'm sorry for what happened, and just try and like be the bigger person, so to speak. So then what is the difference in that last week? What made the difference? What did the conscientious maga do to the individual in order for them to change their entire perception, their entire paradigm, their entire perspective? What did the conscientious maga do? He cut off time. He cut off the person's idea that I have lots of time in order for me to act out what I think I deserve, what I think I'm entitled to. I deserve an apology here. I deserve recognition here. I deserve whatever it is. I'm not okay with myself until I achieve X, Y, or Z, A, B, or C. So the time, the idea that we've got lots of time, is actually what inflates the ego with air. And so the difference between the matzah and the bread is that all of this volume, all of this bigness is air. And what is necessary in order for this bread to get so big? It has to have time, more than 18 minutes. So what we're trying to do in Pesach and Chametz is look and see, like, where is my air? Where is the parts of me that is entitled? Where is the part of me that believes that I was right and I deserve an apology? Where's the part of me that deserves that I'm right in feeling angry? Where's the part of me that believes that like the I, the ani, yeah? This whole thing is called ani. Ani. Where is the part of me that I think is me that is keeping me out of peace with my community, with my understanding? You know, it says that if a person gets angry, it's like worshipping Avodah Zarah, because if everything is hashgacha, if everything comes from Shemayim and everything is so divinely planned, like I should have complete peace all the time, at least when it comes to interaction, even with myself. So what is it? What is this thing of here, matzah? If this is matzah, matzah has this beautiful shoreshia called mem tzadik. And whenever there's a mem tzadik means essence. So whether it's mitzvah, that's an essence of God's will. If you take an orange and you squeeze it and comes out the essence of the orange in juice, how do you say juice? Meat. If you want to be if you want to get into the essence of your body and not put any food inside, that's called tzom, a fast. Again, it's mem tzadik. This is all about mem and tzadik. Even the contraction before the expansion, when Hashem was making space for everything, the contraction, which was an essence, is called tzimtzum. And so what happens is that if we connect to this essence and we look and we see, where is my air? Where is my entitlement? Where is this ani that I think deserves respect? Because that's what makes this whole air thing, is that I deserve respect. And so what we're trying to do in Pesach is look for the ani and rearrange the letters so that it turns into the ayin, the no thing. Because what happens when there's no thing and Hashem's light is shining consistently, always? If there's no thing to obstruct the light, then there's no shadow. And that's what we're trying to do in Pesach. We're not trying to eliminate the shadow. We want to integrate the shadow, because the only way that we can get in touch with the shadow is when, let's say, I help a person find, let's say, I'm not good enough. Okay, yeah, so I'm not good enough is true. But somewhere else in your life, you're phenomenal. Somewhere else in your life, you're amazing. And they're both true at the same time. They have to be both true at the same time. But then if we get really into the I'm not good enough, and you can all do this now. You can all do this now. Everyone's got something, and I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy, or I'm a loser, or I'm not good at something. And if you allow it to be true without fighting it, yeah, then it doesn't feel good. And I ask people when I'm guiding them through this, I say, in this not good feeling, do you feel empowered or disempowered? And usually in a not good feeling, people feel disempowered. And then I say, okay, in that disempowered feeling, if you allow it to be, do you feel big like an adult or do you feel small? And 100% of the time, I feel small. Why? Because the I'm not good enough, or whatever the shadow belief is, it's the child. It's the child. And what does a child need? Any child. It needs connection. It needs acceptance, unconditional acceptance. And so we're trying to get into that place of tmimut, that place of innocence, and move through I call it emotional photosynthesis, move through this resistance to my own not good enough, to my own shadow, my own, like, I don't feel good about myself because I'm not being the light. And when we can do that with this acceptance, we just read about now that in the Parsha, beforehand, and just recently now in Bayakel, that what were they making? They were making the kelim inside the Mizbeach. What was inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim? The only thing in the entire Torah, the only artifact that even infers or denotes a relationship, and those are the kruvim. And the kruvim were what? They were children. They were children. And when they were in a place of acceptance, I accept you as you are now. You don't have to change. You don't have to achieve that income for me to accept you. You don't have to lose that weight for me to accept you. You don't have to do anything for me to accept you. I accept you right now as you are, and it's not easy. This is why it has to be, because we're designed not to want to do it. In this place of acceptance, what would happen in the kruvim? They would face each other, and the voice of the Shekhinah, the voice would speak from this connection. And this is essentially what we're trying to do, is we're trying to eliminate shadow through bringing my own not good enough into the light, where I can execute or apply this acceptance. And then through doing that, I don't need any of this air anymore. Because what am I trying to do with my kavod? What do I need the kavod for? I need the kavod for validation.
Kavod, honor.
Because, yes, honor, yeah. The ego honor, not the kavod of the makom, like the esteem. And so when I can give myself the validation, so I say to my own inner child, I love you just as you are. Not good enough. Not good enough, like that. I love you just the way you are. I accept you just the way you are. And there's a reason. There's a reason. The adult says to the child, I accept you as you are, not being good enough. Not just that, it wasn't for nothing. Because you are the contraction, that I'm not good enough, I, the adult, I get to be amazing, awesome, fantastic, phenomenal, wherever it is in my life. Yeah, do you get this? This is mind-blowing stuff. But this is actually the truth, that there's this significance. You go to the child and you say, it wasn't for nothing. All the abuse that you went through, I became the polarity. All the neglect that you went through, I became the polarity. All of you parents, wherever your parents failed you, notice how you've become the polarity of that failure, and you apply it with your own kids. And this is what we're actually trying to do, is find this acceptance. And once I have this acceptance, once I have this unconditional acceptance of myself, I don't need the validation from the outside world. I've got so much peace and self-respect and self-love for myself that I stop demanding it from other people.